The clock just reset. Twice. We're now almost a month into a government shutdown, and two critical deadlines just dropped that completely change everything. November 1st and November 21st. And here's what almost nobody is connecting. The first deadline doesn't just affect federal workers. It could cut off food assistance for over 40 million Americans. The second? It expires the very funding bill Congress is still fighting over, forcing them to start from scratch. If you've been following the shutdown drama thinking you knew the timeline, you don't anymore. Everything just shifted, and the consequences are about to hit kitchen tables across America. Let's dig in. For those who are new here, I'm Tony, and I've spent the last 8 months working inside the policy and government funding process. I've seen 4 shutdown crises from the inside, advised on appropriation strategy, and helped decode these exact situations for organizations that needed to know what's really happening, not just what's being reported. I started this channel because most coverage of government funding treats you like you need a PhD in parliamentary procedure. You don't. You just need someone to translate the chaos into English. That's what we do here. Before we break down these 2 new deadlines, I want to know, have you personally been affected by a government shutdown before? Whether it's delayed benefits, a closed service, or something more serious, drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one. All right, here's what just happened, and why it matters more than any shutdown story you've heard so far. We're dealing with 2 separate deadlines now, and they're not just moving dates on a calendar. They're creating 2 entirely different crises. Deadline number 1, November 1st. This is when the U.S. Department of Agriculture says it will stop issuing SNAP benefits, what most people call food stamps, if the shutdown continues. We're talking about more than 40 million Americans who could lose access to the food aid they depend on to buy groceries. That's roughly 1 in every 8 Americans. And the USDA didn't sugarcoat it. Their exact words were, "Bottom line, the well has run dry." They're not using emergency reserves this time because those funds are specifically meant for natural disasters, not monthly benefits. Governors in states like Louisiana, Virginia, and Massachusetts are already declaring emergencies or considering using state money to fill the gap. But here's the problem. The USDA has warned that any state that does so will not be reimbursed later, so families are on their own starting November 1st. Deadline number 2, November 21st. This is when the continuing resolution, the temporary funding bill the House passed back in September, actually expires. Yes, you heard that right. The very bill they're still fighting over in the Senate is set to expire in less than a month. Here's the absurdity. Even if the Senate somehow passed that bill today, which they won't, we'd be right back at another shutdown deadline right before Thanksgiving. In other words, the plan they're fighting over doesn't actually fix anything. It just resets the clock. And because the House has been out of session since mid-September and the Senate can't get the 60 votes needed to pass the CR, that ticking clock is now turning into a real-world crisis. So we've got a 3-week window between 2 cliffs, one that hits working families and seniors on November 1st, and another that hits Congress directly on November 21st. Forcing them to draft an entirely new bill. Now here's the thing. This isn't how this was supposed to go. Let's talk about what's really happening here, because the surface story doesn't tell you how broken this process has become. Back in mid-September, Speaker Mike Johnson passed a temporary CR in the House, then sent everyone home for recess. That's where they've been ever since. The plan was simple. Pass a short-term bill, buy some time, come back and negotiate the real funding. But that CR never made it through the Senate. Why? Because it needs 60 votes, which means Republicans need at least some Democrats to sign on. And Democrats have made it crystal clear, they won't vote yes unless Republicans agree to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies that help millions of low- and middle-income Americans afford their health insurance. That's where everything has been stuck for almost a month. Now, the Trump administration is blaming Democrats in the Senate for refusing to reopen the government until they secure the ACA subsidy extension. Democrats are blaming Republicans for sending everyone home instead of staying in session to negotiate. But here's the truth. The calendar is now doing what politicians haven't. It's forcing a decision. And that first deadline, November 1st, is where this gets real. When we talk about SNAP, we're not just talking about a number on a spreadsheet. We're talking about money that circulates directly through local economies. Your neighborhood grocery store, your local market, your corner shop. In small towns especially, SNAP dollars make up a significant portion of total food sales. When that money suddenly disappears, it's not just families who feel it. It's cashiers, store owners, delivery drivers, and suppliers. And because this comes right before the holidays, the ripple effects will show up fast. Grocery stores are already planning seasonal orders. Turkey, produce, canned goods, and many of them rely on November sales to stay in the black for the year. If 40 million Americans suddenly can't spend, those shelves stay stocked longer, spoilage rises, and the shock travels up the supply chain. The last time something like this even came close was during the 2018-2019 government shutdown, which lasted 35 days. Back then, the USDA scrambled to issue February benefits early to avoid a gap, but even that caused confusion, overdrafts, and late payments for months afterward. This time, the department has made it clear the reserve funds aren't being tapped. That means there's no backup plan waiting quietly in the background. And that's what makes this shutdown different. The system has already said it's out of options. Meanwhile, Speaker Mike Johnson is caught in an impossible position. If he brings the House back early to draft a new CR with a later deadline, he'd also have to swear in a newly elected Democrat from Arizona who would add another vote to the opposing side. And even if Johnson gets a new bill through the House, it will likely exclude the ACA subsidies that Democrats are demanding, meaning the Senate could block it all over again. So instead of one big breakthrough, we're watching the same loop start all over. Another short-term patch, another looming deadline, another round of headlines about who's to blame. Meanwhile, real people are the ones stuck waiting. Seniors who rely on SNAP may have to turn to local food pantries or community centers. Families will be forced to stretch budgets that were already thin. And in some states, officials are preparing National Guard units to help distribute food if demand spikes. This isn't just a Washington problem anymore. It's a kitchen table problem. So what does this mean for you? What should you actually do with this information? If you receive SNAP benefits, here's what you need to do right now. First, check your balance and your state's benefit schedule immediately. Each state runs its own timeline, but all of them depend on federal funding. If your payment date falls after November 1st, there's a good chance it won't reload unless the shutdown ends. Second, plan ahead where possible. Buy non-perishables. Stock up on basics like pasta, rice, canned foods, or frozen vegetables. This isn't about panicking, it's about being prepared. Third, look into local resources now, not later. Food pantries, community centers, and emergency assistance programs are going to see a massive spike in demand starting November 1st. Get information early so you're not scrambling if benefits don't come through. Even if you're not on SNAP yourself, this is still something to pay attention to. A gap this big doesn't stay contained. It affects food prices, local jobs, and even the availability of certain items. Many smaller stores could lose a large percentage of their sales overnight. Here's the bottom line. The government may be at a standstill, but the bills at home aren't. And as of November 1st, neither is the hunger clock. The shutdown has dragged on long enough that the political damage is now becoming personal. And the first place most people will notice it is at the grocery store. If lawmakers don't act soon, this won't just be about missed paychecks or delayed projects. It'll be about empty shopping carts, higher prices, and families trying to stretch what's left. Now I want to hear from you. Should the administration dip into those reserve funds to keep benefits going, even though they're meant for natural disasters? Or should Congress be forced back to Washington immediately to fix this before the November 1st deadline hits? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this, because these are the kinds of decisions that reveal what we actually value as a country. If this video helped you understand what's really going on with these two critical deadlines, do me a favor, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who need clear, honest breakdowns of what's happening in Washington. And if you're not already subscribed, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got a lot more coming in the next few weeks, including a breakdown of what actually happens if SNAP benefits stop, how states are preparing for the fallout, and the 3 possible ways this shutdown actually ends. You're not going to want to miss those. Until next time, stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, the more you understand how this system actually works, the less power it has to surprise you. I'll see you in the next one.